So hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of RC Experts. So that's our virtual series where, along with industry pros, we take a deep dive into a specific topic from the world of finance and investing. Today, we're going to be looking at a topic that I think everyone joining us is more or less familiar with. Anyone that's worked in the startup world is going to know about this one. It's how to get funding. So you've either probably been through the process yourself, you've worked with or supported a company that's trying to get funding, or then maybe you're looking into how to raise funds for a project of your own. So with that in mind, we've put together this event to hear 4 different perspectives on funding within the Canadian ecosystem. We're joined by Rachael Singh from Fundsquire, who's going to give us an overview of SR&ED. So that's the Scientific Research and Experimental Development Tax Incentive Program. Tiki Cheung is going to talk to us about how to prepare for an application and touch on a few other grants and incentives available. Our very own Jessica Stronghill is going to give us a rundown on the ins and outs of equity crowdfunding. And we're also joined by Matt O'Leary from Treasure Financial, who's going to give us a founder's perspective on the whole fundraising journey. A warm welcome to all 4 of you. Thank you very much for joining us today. Before we start, just want to give you all a quick reminder to everyone tuning in that this is indeed an interactive session as well. We'd love to hear from you, so please do keep your questions coming in throughout the session as well. I'd like to start by opening up the floor for Rachael, though, who's going to give us an overview on what SR&ED is and a few key details as well. So Rachael, when you're ready, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Hi, everybody. So as John mentioned, my name is Rachael and I'm here with Fundsquire. So to start off, what I'll do is just provide you with a quick overview of what the SR&ED program is. So when looking at funding options, there are many different avenues. This can understandably be quite overwhelming. 2 main areas that businesses will typically focus on are equity and debt, in which both have great advantages individually as well as in conjunction with one another. An area that can be quite often overlooked or even just misunderstood by founders is incentives and grants that are available to them. So the CRA, provincial government, and private organizations are just some of the providers and administrators of grants or incentives. This is an avenue that I believe every business should explore on their funding journey. It's competitive, however, it can also be a very rewarding area if navigated well. So as mentioned, the incentive program that I'm going to dive a little deeper on today is the Scientific Research and Educational Development Tax Credit. This is also referred to as SR&ED credits. So what is SR&ED? SR&ED is an incentive program run by the CRA that entitles companies to claim 35% or more of their eligible expenditure in the form of a tax reduction or cash payout. When provincial programs and overheads are included, cash refunds for CCPCs can be more than 55% of claimed expenditure. The SR&ED program provides more than $3 billion in tax incentives to over 20,000 claimants annually. This is making it the single largest federal program that supports business R&D in Canada. As its name suggests, the SR&ED program uses tax incentives to encourage Canadian businesses of all sizes and in all sectors to conduct research and development. This program is intended to encourage employment, innovation, and talent retention in Canada. So who's eligible? Firstly, you generally need to be a Canadian corporation paying Canadian salaries or contractors. Secondly, the work you're doing has to fit into the eligibility criteria. There's a lot of nuance here, but broadly speaking, it's conducting novel scientific or technological research. To learn more about the SR&ED program, you can take a look at the Government of Canada information page online, or just reach out to me directly and I would be happy to walk you through further with that. So for incentives that are available to you, how can you take advantage of these? This is where Fundsquire comes in. So for some background on us, Fundsquire is a global startup and SME financing company. We have a global presence with offices in Canada, Australia, and the UK. We empower entrepreneurs by providing fast and simple non-dilutive capital to grow their business. Us as a business, we believe that SMEs should have access to capital early and quickly Being well capitalized gives you the freedom to drive forward, grow, and ultimately differentiate yourself from your competitors when in the market or raising capital. Through our unique financing products, our customers have the ability to access their SR&ED incentives, grants, and/or revenue upfront and throughout the year via a simple cost-effective loan. So to use this type of financing to your advantage, I'll run over a couple of cases that may resonate with you. We do see these quite often. Case one could be extending your runway into a capital raise. Companies generally underestimate how long it can take to raise equity. Having extra cash in the bank takes some time and the pressure off here. Case two would be taking advantage of an opportunity. For many businesses, a large contract or opportunity comes at a significant upfront cost to the business. The ROI on using non-dilutive capital here is quite clear. We've had customers double their workforce with our funding, enabling them to fulfill game-changing contracts moving forward. And case three is reinvesting into R&D during the fiscal year to hit your milestones quicker. For many fast-growing businesses, more money is a direct correlation to more growth. Whether that's in R&D, product, or sales, again, it's a clear ROI. Hitting your milestones quicker will increase your valuation. By taking advantage of accessing assets available to you up front, you can get the growth and capital you need to help you on your journey. Typically, our best customers will use a smart combination of debt, equity, and incentives to position themselves in with the right capital at the right time. To conclude my area of the segment, it's just important to assess on your funding journey the ROI through any avenue that you're taking. I would encourage you to consider your funding goals and objectives to help identify the right combination of debt, equity, and incentives that would be right for you. And I think that'll transition us into Tiki, who will talk about valuations and grants a little bit further.
Perfect. Thanks, Rachel. So as mentioned, my name is Tiki. I'm actually a partner at EY in our valuations group. So I value businesses and intellectual property, particularly in the tech sector. And just building a little bit upon what Rachel has already mentioned is that, when we mention SR&ED, I mean, SR&ED is a fantastic thing because first and foremost, it's a non-dilutive financing. And what that means is you don't have to give up any of your equity in order to be able to be eligible for it. But, if we think about basics in terms of, how to even start with this application is that a lot of people, don't realize that SR&ED is actually filed along with your tax return. So that means your company actually needs to have financial statements, has to have the tax return filed, and then you fill out the T661 form specifically. And, SR&ED, I always think of it as a program that actually really helps businesses really develop their data management because you have to track your projects, you have to have contemporaneous documentation along with the financials. And so, when you think about the actual SR&ED application, a lot of people actually outsource it to a third party. And that's really because it helps you reduce the risk of audit. You're relying on the expertise of someone else who knows how to fill out the forms, and it probably improves the quality of the filing. So at EY, we actually have an entire division called our Business Tax Incentives team that helps entrepreneurs from, seed co level all the way up to like public telcos in filing these SR&ED claims. And, they're engineers and technical experts, so they know exactly how these work. But again, the beauty about SR&ED is that it really helps a business think about, their own processes and how are they tracking this information, because whether it's SR&ED or other types of incentives or other forms of financing is that fundamentally a lot of the same information has to be available. So, the financials, tracking your historical costs, knowing what you've spent. Because if you think about, other incentive programs besides SR&ED, there's probably, I'd say on average, maybe 80 every year that get administered across, all levels of government. And it's not easy necessarily understanding what those incentive programs are, where to find them. And so that's why I usually rely on our business tax incentives team to actually alert me about, what's out there. But, for example, a lot of people understand what SR&ED is, but not everybody understands that Ontario also has an innovation tax credit that you can layer on top of SR&ED. And it's basically the exact same filing. So it's kind of two birds with one stone. So, when you think about bigger perspective. Like as a evaluator, I always tell people that you want to think longer term horizon, bigger picture, because, SR&ED is great and it helps you finance kind of your working capital and your immediate needs, but down the line, you're probably going to continue needing additional support. And so when you're an early stage company, you also want to understand that, how do I prepare kind of for these future rounds of financing and just understanding what's out there. And so again, having these financials, having, an idea of your SR&ED claims is great because investors are often interested in that. Like a lot of times companies will come and ask me, how much do you think my business is worth? And I tell them very candidly, as an early stage company, it's very, very difficult. And the best metric I always tell them is knowing exactly what you spent, because your cost base is one single metric that you have control over. And you want to know that, if I'm going to get an investor, I'm not just gonna, have them join me just for what I spent. I would need a return on top of that. So again, all of these things have a connection. So you're filing for SR&ED, but it actually has correlation to your future rounds of financing, because again, it forms a basis of value that you've already invested. And so, other than financials and having, a good idea about, your cost and what you want to spend on a go forward basis, just make sure that you have a good pitch deck put together, because, when you have an opportunity to meet with an angel investor or go into a pitch contest, is that you don't want to be scrambling to pull together your deck at that time, because you're going to be tracking all of your spend for SR&ED and stuff anyway. So you might as well do this on a ongoing basis where you're updating your deck, because your business is evolving so quickly, right? And so, we're probably putting a lot of technical terms out there, and again, I don't want to take it for granted that it's an easy process. It's not, particularly with people that don't have a, financing background. Some of these terms can be very challenging. So, as an entrepreneur, what I would say is that, both in terms of your financials before you think about financing or these incentive programs, is try to gain an understanding of what they represent. And, you can pick up the phone, you can call someone like me and I can direct you to one of our EY volunteers who'd be happy to talk to you, or someone from Rachel's team. But I would say that, some other resources that you should be aware of, and I always recommend to early stage entrepreneurs, is BDC has a fantastic entrepreneur toolkit that is free for anyone. You can go in there. They have training sessions on basic financial concepts, like how to pull together a P&L or a balance sheet, and things like, where can you find free or low cost software for accounting, and other types of things that help entrepreneurs. So that's one resource I would say. And there's always organizations that provide support in other ways, that not necessarily financing, but other types of support. So, at EY, helping entrepreneurs is something that's very, very important to us. And we run an Entrepreneur of the Year program. But just in terms of trying to be sure that all entrepreneurs get access to resources and funding, we also run specialized programs. So we have a Winning Women program that's geared towards helping women businesses grow and scale. We have the Entrepreneur Access Network, which is a mentorship program that we developed to assist Black and Indigenous entrepreneurs. And we also hold an annual pitch contest in connection with the CGLCC to support our LGBTQ entrepreneurs. So lots of resources in terms of, so don't think of financing necessarily as just monetary. There are a lot of great resources out there that can help you grow your business that are non-monetary as well. And so I think with that, I'll pause and switch it over to Jessica.
Thanks so much, Tiki, and happy to be here today. Thank you, John, for inviting me. So I guess just to introduce myself, I'm a business development manager at FrontFundr, and I work with top emerging Canadian companies to help them access the capital that they need. And in regards to our services, I think a really great place to start would be to explain, what is crowdfunding and how does it work? And equity crowdfunding is really the ability to source capital from retail investors in addition to traditional investors as well. Startups are the growth engine to the Canadian economy, so it's crucial that they're able to access the capital that they need so that they can continue to grow and create job opportunities in the Canadian markets. And crowdfunding provides everyday Canadians with the ability to invest into brands that they know and that they love. And typically this opportunity was reserved strictly for VCs or high net worth individuals, but with crowdfunding, everybody has the ability to be a dragon, so to speak. So crowdfunding allows startups to open a round of funding to their customers and social media followers, turn them into little brand ambassadors and brand champions, and once a customer becomes an investor, they have skin in the game. So they tell everybody that they know about your product or service, they repeat purchases, and they're invested in your story as well as the success of your company. In addition to a capital raise, it's a marketing campaign as well that allows you to really benefit from the additional brand awareness and the brand exposure. And then, another question that I get asked often are what kind of companies are really the right fit for this source of funding, especially because it is a bit of a newer endeavor in Canada. And we find that companies that are the best fit are ones that have a business model that's easy for the retail investor to understand and a story that's relatable. So we typically work with companies that are raising their seed round, that have an established MVP and a community of customers and community members that they'd be able to convert. In addition to that, we also have 30,000 investors on our platform that we'd be able to showcase the investment opportunity to. And we look for companies that are well positioned for growth, who will prioritize their investors and their shareholders as well. In addition to that, we're also very focused on driving diversity across the marketplace. Women-led companies, for example, only received 2.3% of VC funding last year. And we're really looking to disrupt this model, ensuring that capital is available to female and minority-led companies across all industries as well. I also wanted to discuss the relationship that we have with VCs, because again, that's something that I get asked fairly often. And in the past, entrepreneurs had to rely solely on VCs and high net worth individuals for their capital needs. And this really limited them to trying to draw capital from a very small and oversaturated pool of investors. We complement traditional funding methods by working alongside VCs and high net worth individuals so that startups are able to onboard lead investors while still opening the round to the customers and followers as well. And showing that there's an established VC or lead investor interest in an investment opportunity is super exciting for retail investors. They love the idea of being able to invest alongside angels or venture capitalists because it's an opportunity that was never afforded to them before. So, they obviously get to be a part of that. In addition, converting customers and followers into investors demonstrates to VCs as well at later stages of funding that a brand has a solid and loyal customer base. And many issuers that we work with appreciate the fact that crowdfunding allows you to set your own terms as well. So you're able to determine your valuation, your dilution, maintain control over your company, because sometimes it's hard to get what you want from VCs, especially when they know that you need the capital to grow. So the benefit to crowdfunding really is that it allows you to keep the majority of equity in your company while helping you grow through the capital that you've raised and the brand ambassadors that you've established. Another thing worth mentioning is the cap table itself, because I get asked that often as well, is what will the cap table look like after a round? But we have things like a special purpose vehicle that we're able to offer, and it makes the cap table very streamlined. So it's just one line on the cap table. In addition to that, we're also able to provide a voting trust agreement that assigns all voting rights as well as power of attorney to one individual within the company. So, through those two things, you're basically able to maintain power over the company itself. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention in regards to VCs and our relationship with them is that we also have an advisory network in place to support founders after they raise, understanding that the ability to draw on the experience of others is a fundamental component on the path to success.
Thank you. Thank you very much, all three, for the overview there of SR&ED and equity crowdfunding as well. And we'll jump over to Matt in a second, who has actually used both forms of funding for his company, so we can hear kind of from someone who's been through the process from the other side. Just a couple of questions I wanted to, we have a few from the audience as well, but a few of my own too is, I guess the first one for Rachael and Tiki is that from what I'm understanding, one of the benefits of SR&ED is obviously the monetary side of stuff. But another one is the fact that it helps you get everything in order and prepared for future fundraising and kind of teeing everything up for success. I guess my question is, do you have a typical stage of business that tends to go for SR&ED? Is it kind of very early on? Is it more in the middle? Or is it kind of dependent on each application who it's best suited to?
Sure, I can take a first stab at that. Is that In reality, like organizations of all stages, as long as they're doing R&D activity, all take advantage of SR&ED. But I would say that particularly for earlier stage company, it's a lot more important because again, as non-dilutive financing, it's one of the easiest ways for you to be able to get access to financing for your working capital. So also I would say that most of their activities for earlier stage companies are focused on R&D, right? So a lot more qualifying expenses versus a company that's already operating and might have other things, that they're focused on. So it really impacts all organizations of all stages of development, but I would say particularly for those earlier stage ones, this is an area worth the investment.
Absolutely. And I'm going to jump into a question from the audience here as well. We've got one from Derek Hurst who says, for a startup, is he correct in the understanding that SR&ED is a way to help your bottom line on your financials and not really something to help cash flow? So you'd need an operating line to cover the expenses you're expecting SR&ED to refund. Again, I guess, Tiki, could you maybe pick that one up as well?
So SR&ED is actually an input tax credit. So you're right in the sense that you had to spend the money first before you can file the claim and then get it the following period. But it's almost like you have to think of it as an ongoing process. You're right, upfront capital, it is always on the entrepreneur to spend that first. But once you filed your claim, like organizations like Rachael can actually lend against that, right? And so if you think about it, knowing that you've put together a quality filing means that someone is willing to lend against that. And so it gives you the opportunity to borrow very cheaply against it. And so think of it also as like, other than the immediate cash outflow, as long as you continue to do R&D activity, is that it helps finance your working capital on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, so I'll chime in here as well. There's kind of like a twofold to it is you can finance your SR&ED that you're expecting to receive back. And it works like a virtuous cycle. So you can take, those funds, reinvest them back into your R&D, progress your operations forward and increase your credit at the end. Once you receive that credit, you can kind of do it again and keep looping around. So like Tiki said at the beginning, you're obviously going to have that capital up front, but businesses like ours at Fundsquire can help you with that journey to ensure that you're set up against the credit you're looking to receive.
And another question that's coming related to SR&ED is, I know Tiki, you touched on a couple of resources like the BDC toolkit. I guess maybe Rachael, if you could answer this one too, kind of, do you have any recommendations on resources or additional information that people can look up online? Obviously, we'll send an email with follow-up after this, but any kind of good websites or information packs available you recommend for people that are looking to get started or learn a bit more about SR&ED?
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have quite a bit of resources on our website. We have tons of blog posts. So I would definitely start there. You could also look at the Government of Canada website that will break it down to you in more of a technical detail. But if you're just looking for funding options or to learn more about SR&ED on a high level and really understand the program, the Fundsquire website, which is fundsquire.ca, has a lot of resource available for you. So you'll definitely be able to find something that's relevant.
Fantastic. A couple of other questions, but I want to bring in Matt at this point. We'll circle back to questions at the end. But we've got Matt with us today, as I mentioned, because he's actually been through both of these types of funding. He's going to lend us a founder's perspective on it. So welcome to the call, Matt. Thank you very much for joining us. Before we dig in, could you just give us a quick pitch on what Treasure is and how it works and what you do?
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Treasure, and it's an educational prepaid card for kids. We're teaching young people how to save smart and spend wisely.
Awesome. I think I mentioned this to you before, but I wish I had that kind of tool when I was growing up. I was not the most financially savvy, but
you and me both.
Could you talk to us a little bit about what the Treasure funding journey has looked like so far, and whether it's as you expected, were there any surprises along the way, and how you've navigated it?
Sure, yeah, there's always no shortage of surprises. And we've tapped into a number of different sources. So we've raised some angel money. When bringing on advisors, we also asked them to write a check That was some great advice we had got once upon a time. And we participated in an accelerator. We were in TechStars Atlanta. So that includes also getting some funds in the door, which is great. And we recently launched a FrontFundr campaign. So we're now doing the equity crowdfunding thing. And on top of that, we've also taken advantage of SR&ED. So yeah, we're taking advantage of a ton of different funding options at the moment.
And can you walk me through those two different options? I mean, I think Rachael, Tiki, and Jessica gave a great overview of what those funding options are and why they appeal. But for Treasure, what was the appeal for SR&ED and equity crowdfunding? What stood out to you between those funding methods?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, SR&ED's great. Assuming your work is eligible, it is usually quite, technical stuff that's required. But assuming you're eligible for SR&ED, I mean, it is a great way to get non-dilutive money every year, as Tiki mentioned, and I believe Rachael mentioned as well. So that's fantastic. I mean, it can be a lot of work, but there is great support out there as well. And we've taken advantage of some of we have a SR&ED consultant as an example that helps us with those claims. Although, having a consultant can also be pricey. People look at that because of the costs involved. I think it's well worth it. So I highly recommend getting support for that. And then, I mean, on the equity crowdfunding side of things, after doing a ton of research, we decided that this would be a great path for us. We have a fantastic community and thought it would be a great idea to go after that. So we launched on our campaign about a month or so ago. We've raised just over $125,000 so far, which is halfway towards our goal of $250K. I mean, we've had a great experience so far with FrontFundr. The entire team and platform is first class. In fact, Jessica was our first point of contact there, and she really, helped smooth over the process and get us started. So yeah, I mean, we're big fans of both SR&ED and equity crowdfunding, and so far it has helped us to keep the lights on, which is obviously very important for a startup at our stage.
Totally, yeah. I've never raised money myself, but I've worked in companies that have been very close to the people that have been doing it. And one thing that stood out to me is the amount of time and effort that it requires. For you on the Treasure journey, is it something that you fully anticipated would take X amount of your time and you were prepped for it? Or did you not quite expect that? And kind of, well, how big was X for you? How much time did you have to spend on these fundraising activities?
Yeah, good question. I mean, this isn't the first time I have been down the fundraising path, so I was well aware of the challenges one can face, and also just how hard and time consuming fundraising can be in most cases. I don't know of very many stories that, it's ever been super easy. I mean, what I would advise is just to explore all the different avenues and figure out what is right for your company. There's no right or wrong answer. There's no single answer to that question. And your job as the founder is to keep the lights on, right? So you have to do what you have to do to make your company a success. So taking advantages of things like SR&ED and equity crowdfunding are great ways to accomplish that. Yeah, and just choose your, make sure that you're open to all funding options and choose them wisely. As Jessica mentioned, well, first of all, SR&ED being non-dilutive is fantastic, right? And the equity crowdfunding side of things with the voting trust agreement as an example, maintaining control of your company at an early stage is also important. So lots of benefits to both SR&ED and equity crowdfunding for sure.
I guess that's kind of a nice point to bring it back to a couple of questions for you, Jessica, on the equity crowdfunding side. Obviously, we covered the benefits, and there are many of them, and there's a few perceived myths that need busting. I guess it's not for everyone, though. So are there certain times where you would say, or at any points you can say sort of, this is not the right option for this type of business, or is it case by case? Like, who is it not for, equity crowdfunding?
So I would say it's really case by case, right? We put a lot of effort into trying to select companies that we know are going to be successful on the platform. It really is a collaborative effort. And the last thing that I want to do is for example, onboard a company and then have it not be, a knock out of the park, so to speak, right? So as far as companies go that, perhaps might not be the right fit are ones that are very early stage. So they perhaps don't have an MVP established. They don't have any customers, social media, where they're able to promote the campaign too, because that's a very important component of crowdfunding. Yes, we have the 30,000 investors that we can showcase the opportunity to, but in addition to that, you really want to be able to convert your own customers as well, because that's how you're going to establish that loyalty. So it's the best of both worlds, and it's really important to have both aspects come together.
I think that I'll jump back over to some audience questions now, and they link quite nicely. And I guess this is a question for the whole panel, but it's probably an understatement to say that the last 18 months have been a tad unexpected and turned everything upside down on its head. But what do you all feel about fundraising and the impact COVID has had? So the question here is, has COVID made it harder to raise funding, and how? So maybe Tiki or Rachel, if you want to jump in on that one.
Sure. I think it would really depend on the sector. If you think about COVID, everybody was at home. And so if you think about crowdfunding, you now have a much bigger audience that's in front of their screen, looking at ways to keep themselves engaged. So I would say that in some respect, COVID has actually improved interest and actually educated more people about ways that they can invest in other companies. But if you're thinking a little bit more about the traditional maybe VC, PE type funding, I think it's really driven by sector. Tech's been particularly hot, and there's a lot of dry powder out there. So you've got VCs that are looking for deals, that are actually actively looking online, looking to meet companies virtually. But I would say that if you think about maybe angel investments for earlier stage companies, a lot of those, you met through traditional networking, type activities at marketing events, at sector events. And so that has probably made it a little bit more difficult just for people to expand their network that way. So I think those are just observations from, my own personal perspective, but I would say that COVID certainly hasn't stopped people from being able to get financing. You might just have to work differently.
Yeah, I think to echo what Tiki's saying, there is the traditional routes that I spoke about earlier that people typically look into. Those may have been more difficult during that time. So it's definitely been a time for businesses to be creative and look at other avenues that they may not have considered prior. So, financing or leveraging things like their SR&ED, their revenue, their tax incentives, whatnot. Those are all areas that businesses have started to look into a little bit more and put more emphasis on. But also, like Jessica mentioned, the equity crowdfunding side of things too, because you're able to engage with the regular audience more.
Absolutely. I've got one eye on the time here. We've got about 5-6 minutes, and I want to squeeze in a couple more questions before we wrap up. The first one kind of relates to that point that we're just discussing, and I wanted to ask both Jessica and Tiki about this one first. The question that's come in is, what does the panel recommend as a way to improve funding for underrepresented groups? And I guess the point here, or the kind of thing I think would be interesting to talk about, is obviously the reason we're having this call is that, financial literacy and funding options can sometimes feel a little bit inaccessible to people. I think, Jessica, you mentioned that less than 3% of VC money goes to women-led organizations currently. So T, could you tell us a little bit more about EY's Winning Women program and how things are changing there? And then maybe Jessica too, talk about how, equity crowdfunding is there to democratize the financial model and kind of how you see that progressing.
For sure. So I think these are all valid observations in that, financing can be difficult, particularly for certain, let's call it subsectors or other types of entrepreneurs. And so again, part of it is just understanding what resources are out there. And so when we developed our mentorship programs, we have one, again, our Winning Women program is to help women businesses scale and grow. And so every year we run this campaign, and it's across North America. It's actually part of our global platform. But the goal is to look for women-led businesses that want to grow and scale, but just need some help doing it. And so we take advantage of our network, our client base, and try to help them find the linkages and put them in contact with the right people to help potentially scale their business. And that includes investors. And so again, right now we are currently working on a program that will be launching in the fall called our Entrepreneur Access Network. And that is again aimed towards helping Black and Indigenous entrepreneurs, making sure that they also get access to resources, just based on demographics, they traditionally have been underserved. And so we fully recognize that, and we're taking active steps to try and make things better.
And on the equity crowdfunding side, Jessica, maybe you could talk to us a little bit more about how that model kind of breeds inclusivity and makes things a little bit more open and kind of, accessible to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, with the figure that I mentioned before, with 2.3% of venture capital, being provided to women-led companies, if you look at our past issuers, 18% of the companies that we've raised for are women-led businesses, right? So again, really striving to push diversity across all markets and represent, every entrepreneur possible, as long as they have a good business model in place, so to speak. Because I think that's a really important component. And we talk about trends a lot, as to where we see, these types of things going. And I really believe that the first place that we're going to start to see impact is in communities itself. So, when children, for example, have better access to financial literacy with Treasure, for example, or if, women are able to go and get the funding that they need, or if minorities are able to go and get the funding they need so that they can make impactful change in their communities, create job growth, then I think we'll know we're on the right path. I think there needs to be a lot more education. And through the initiative with the 51 that we did, where we focused on 3 female-led businesses, that was an important aspect of it as well. So basically providing education about the investment opportunities themselves, but also providing information to female investors to let them know about the opportunity so they can diversify their portfolios, and just really spreading the word out there.
Matt, I have one more question in the bag for you from the audience before we wrap this one up. We're almost there. The question that's come in is, did you consider raising more angel or VC money instead of crowdfunding? What made you decide on the crowd for the money? And is marketing a factor, or were there any other aspects?
Yeah, so, I mean, the interesting thing about, our FrontFundr campaign is we look at it as a very great streamlined way of actually running our fundraising process. So we've actually brought on what, some angels we may have brought on directly onto the platform to just go through it and have the platform FrontFundr essentially handle that for us. So it's not sort of like one or the other necessarily. Certainly when it comes to angel money, we love the idea of, one line on the cap table. The voting trust agreement's a big deal for us, as well as, we're basically keeping control of the company while we're raising funds, which is fantastic. And we're still super early stage. So that's sort of another reason for that. I don't know if I answered all the questions there. And then, I think the marketing side of it, I mean, that's a very interesting one as well. So we do see, brand champions coming out of this. So it's great for that as well. There's just so many pros to it depending on your stage. And for our stage, it was just absolutely perfect. And I actually just wanted to throw in there that we're also a client of Fundsquire to help us actually bridge the gap between now and our closing of the equity crowdfunding campaign. So, you put all of these things together and you should be able to achieve success.
Absolutely, there's many options there, and there's many people to help you guide and navigate through them, right? But I guess it's about picking the best match per company as well.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, I'm afraid that's pretty much all we have time for today. I want to say a huge thank you to all our panelists for joining us and sharing the knowledge and insights. So thanks, Rachael, Tiki, Jessica, and Matt. I really enjoyed listening to what you have to say, and it was a pleasure having you join us.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much.
Fantastic. We will, thanks to everyone at home for tuning in as well. I hope you found it interesting and insightful. We will, of course, be sending a follow-up email where you'll have the recording, some key learnings and findings, and a few other bits and pieces of information as well. Quick reminder that if you would like any more introductory information on the basics of SR&ED, Fundsquire do have a fantastic guide on this, which I think is called the Ultimate SR&ED Guide. You can find it on their blog, and we'll pop it in our email as well. We'll probably include some information about the Winning Women program if you'd like to learn more about that as well. But thank you all very much for joining us. Hope you have a great rest of the week. Get outside, enjoy some sun, and we'll have another event very soon. Thanks a lot.
All right, take care, everyone.